Okay, so we start.
I guess.
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you for coming. We're here with the candidates for the mayor of the city of Wenatchee. To my left, we have Frank Kuntz, the incumbent, and to his left, we have Bryan Campbell, the challenger. In the room today and asking questions will be the editorial board of the Wenatchee World and reporter Michelle McNeil, and we can't be seen on camera, but we'll introduce ourselves for the sake of the audience.
I'm Cal Fitzsimmons, managing editor.
I'm Tracy Warner, the editorial page editor,
Rufus Woods, publisher.
and Michelle McNeil, reporter. Okay, thanks. We'll ask each of you questions in turn. Let's start with Bryan. If you could briefly describe the top 3 reasons you would be the best choice for mayor of Wenatchee.
Only the top 3. The top 1, I think, is my public service that I've had to the community and my chance to get out and talk and listen to the people and find out what they're asking for and what they need in the city. And through that, I want to be able to integrate and unite the community as one and become one Wenatchee. And I think that will be our best bet going forward as far as to get the community sort of out of the mud. Feel like we're kind of stuck. We got through some crises, and the Town Toyota Center crisis has been resolved through collaborative work with the mayor and council and the citizens. And now that that's behind us, going forward, we need a new destination, and I think we need to derive that destination with the public collaboratively, and then want to lead them towards that destination. So as far as the next one, I think we really need to get behind the fire issue that we had. I think that was absolutely devastating, and I think we need to learn a lot more this time than we did last time, and hopefully we'll be able to work with the other agencies in the surrounding communities so that we have a real good pre-fire plan and initial attack so that that doesn't happen again.
Okay, thank you.
Same question?
Same question, please.
I'll say the following. I think at least the 3 qualities that I possess as I've been mayor. Obviously, we had an issue with the Town Toyota Center that I jumped in with both feet and worked really hard in trying to get to a resolution. And I look back at that time, and I went to Olympia on 3 separate occasions. I was met with Speaker of the House Frank Chop. I mean, we got our legislative delegation put together. We got the 8 entities on board. So there's a lot that happened through that with a certain management style that I think worked. So I like to think that continues to work. The second thing I would say is collaboration. We have collaborated a lot in the 4 years that I've been mayor. This isn't a decision-making process that happens just with me. We have a finance committee that's new to the city's committee work. As also we have public safety. So I'm bringing the council involved in some of the decision-making that we do in terms of budgeting, in terms of midstream. Can we afford to do this? Can we afford to do that? And it's something that I'm not doing by myself. I'm doing it with a group of people, which I think helps. We've also collaborated with the city of East Wenatchee on fireworks and the museum, and we're working on some stuff with IT with them. We continue to partner with Chelan County. We do the regional justice system. They do our court system for us. We just signed an agreement for them to do emergency management for us. So we continue to try to cooperate and do those sorts of things, which I think is kind of going forward where we need to be. And I would say lastly, their sustainability committee's report is out there. I do a lot at what I call 30,000 foot level. Am I making decisions that's going to leave our city in a better spot 15 years from now, 20 years from now? Some of the things we've taken on, we've all talked about over a cup of coffee, and no one ever figured out how to get done, whether that's fire annexation, the ultimate annexation of Old Station, whenever that takes place, and other things. So I think I've shown an ability to make decisions and help the process get to a point where we've been able to accomplish things that we've all kind of talked about and never been able to do. So I like to be able to keep doing that, and I think my leadership style works for that.
Thank you. Brian, you mentioned you'd like to integrate and unite the community. How does that come about?
That's a really long process. I think in the past, the government tends to tell the public kind of what they're going to do after they've done it and say that, we know what's best for you and here's where we are. We've heard leaders lead, but they don't necessarily take off down the right road. In order to get the destination from the people and then serve the people is what I want to do. And I've been out working in the community through my 28 years of public service with fire and police and other agencies and organizations. I've gotten a very close-up look at what the community is looking for and what they need. And I've gone out there and garnered their respect versus going out there and demanding it. So I think that I'm very well integrated in the community in that way, and I've walked the walk for 28 years. And so I think I'm trying to regain that trust in government that they will actually do what the citizens want and be a good public servant for the citizens.
So, Frank, can you respond?
Yeah, again, if the question is, how do we integrate the community, I think a lot of things that we're currently doing now, you look at our South Wenatchee planning effort, again, you go to our friends in South Wenatchee, you get them involved, you get them to adopt a plan, and then it's the city's job to figure out how to get resources to help them do the kinds of things that they're asking for us to do to help them in South Wenatchee. So, I think our community is doing a better job in the last 4 or 5 years of going to the community, asking for their support in certain things, and then getting it back in spades. Whether it's raising taxes for the Town Toyota Center, which might be remarkable, whether it's annexation of the fire district. Those are outreaches that take some time, that take effort, that take energy, and we've been successful at it. I think the South Wenatchee plan, quite frankly, is going to be a success. It's not going to be a success tomorrow. We got to get the plan done. We got to hear from the community. We got to come up and figure out what their wants and needs are, and then it's up to the government to try to figure out how to partner with our friends in South Wenatchee to make some of those things happen. I've been a notorious partnership maker, and we'll do it again in South Wenatchee and help get them some of the things they need.
Thank you. Next major question then will be for Frank to start. What are the top 3 challenges facing the city in the next 5 years?
I have said this for a while now on the campaign stump, and if you were to say, so what would I want to focus on over the next 5 years? You got to take the old station annexation off the table, because that's going to happen, and that's but take that off. What should we be doing? I say it's the 3 S's. I say it's streets, sidewalks, and a sewer system, and I'll expand on that. Sewer, if we don't expand the sewer system in Old Station and then out into Sunny Slope, that's the only place we have left to grow. And we're the only purveyor of sewer on this side of the river in the urban area. So we really don't have any choices but to make sure that we expand that. Might not help us tomorrow, but in 10 or 15 years, the next mayor will be very happy that he has a sewer line and some urban development in the Sunny Slope area. Our street system, we're doing a pavement management program right now. We expect the report back soon that will tell us how much we need to spend on street repavement. It's going to be a big number. I don't know if it's $30 million, $40 million. It's going to be a very big number. So we have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. What methodology are we going to use to try to get our streets paved? I don't remember the last time we paved a city street around here from curb to curb. It's been a while. And the last thing I would say is sidewalks. We have a need in South Wenatchee for additional sidewalks. We've got 2 projects going on right now, both safe routes to school projects. The city has a little bit of extra money we're putting into some sidewalk projects down there. There's some places where we need to tear some out and in front of even city buildings and stuff. So those aren't the sexy items, okay? But those are the things that government should be doing, and I would think in the next 5 years we would be set up in a plan to be able to do sidewalks, sewer expansion, and a major improvement to our roads.
Would you say that those 3 S's, particularly the streets and sidewalks, have been neglected?
Streets, obviously, but you can't just say that in Wenatchee, right? All cities are struggling with how do you repave streets, how do you keep up with, as the cost for oil and repavement, and you got federal requirements that says every time you skin a street and put the little 2 inches of asphalt on it, you got to be ADA compliant. Okay, so all cities are kind of struggling with that. I don't think we're any different than any other. That being said, you still have to deal with it, and so we need to figure out a way to make it happen. I think in Seattle doing a $1 billion property tax increase for streets. I'm not saying that we're going to do that, but most cities are kind of struggling with how to keep up with that.
So you talked about the need to extend the sewer lines in Sunny Slope and Old Station.
Mm-hmm.
Is the purpose of extending sewer lines in order to expand the city limits?
It's to accommodate growth.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you think about what we've done on at Riverside 9, the new apartment complex, you got 310 units and it's full. And the Wideners are going to come in and buy some more property and build more. The city of Wenatchee, as Brian has pointed out, and I point out, is landlocked. And so at some point, again, this isn't for tomorrow. This is for 15 years from now, for 20 years from now. We need to be the one that gets a sewer line out there, and so we can accommodate growth. That growth, the city limits is whatever it is. It's to accommodate urbanized growth, which we need to accommodate the folks that are trying to move here, because there's a lot of them that are trying to move here.
So I'd like to ask the same question to Brian.
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, it's what are the top 3 challenges facing the city of Wenatchee in the next 5 years?
The top 3 challenges, number 1 is probably the annexation of Old Station. That is within the urban growth boundary. As we are landlocked, that's the only way we can really go economically, so we need to go that direction. And the petition process has started already, again, for the second time, to get that annexed, and that's something that needs to happen. We need to go that direction. We need to get sewer services out there so we can accommodate that growth. And that kind of creates some of the other problems that the challenges that we're going to have. We are a great community with great recreational opportunities. We need our educational system upgraded a little bit, I think. We'd like to get more 4-year university type degrees through here, whether it's working with Central Washington University or another one. As the people come in here for these opportunities and to retire for our medical facilities, it's creating some other problems as our development on the waterfront creates 100% occupancy on these new rental apartments. Also, that then starts pricing other people out of the market. We have a homeless problem that we need to deal with, and we have people on fixed income. And as all of these increases in their costs go up, their rent and their other taxes, that makes it more of a burden for them when they're on fixed income or they're homeless and trying to get into a home. So we're sometimes a victim of our own success, and we need to have that growth in the community. But as we do so, we have to keep our eyes on the other problems that we may be creating, and that is taking care of the homeless and taking care of people on fixed income.
So as the mayor of the city of Wenatchee, what role would you play in expanding educational opportunities here? Is that the city's function?
That's not probably directly. I mean, you obviously work with Jim Richardson at the college and be in discussions on, this is part of a long-term plan as far as tourism and bringing people to live in the area. It's a small outlet that it wouldn't be a lot of work for the mayor involved with that one. I'd be focusing more on retaining our police department, because as we are growing rapidly, we've heard that we're back up to maybe 36 officers, but 15 years ago I think we were at 44. So that the number of officers is way down, and we need to rebuild that department because we've grown substantially and we hope to grow more. And as we do so, we are going to need more police, and that's something that we should not be contracting out with somebody else, with another entity. We would lose our focus. We would lose our PROACT unit. We would lose the intimate knowledge of what's going on in our community and lose control.
Do you agree, Frank, that we need to grow our police department?
Yeah, we've, Cal, thanks for the question. We've, since I've been mayor, we've added 2 new positions, and then we've, going back to partnerships, we partnered with the Wenatchee School District to share in the cost of a school resource officer. So today we have a full police officer at Wenatchee High School. The school district's paying 75% of that, we're paying 25%. Tom tells me that he thinks the full staffing would be 40, so are we a couple of short? Yeah, we are a couple of short, and I would expect that to the extent that we annex Old Station and bring that into the city limits, one of the new hires would be an additional police officer, perhaps 2, depending on how that all works out. So yeah, I think we're short 1 or 2. We've added 3 since I've been mayor, but we could certainly add more.
Well, you seem to be in agreement on Old Station annexation. You sort of took it off the table as a top priority because it's going to get done, I think you said, so it's not really the issue in front of you. But you had it as one of the top issues facing the city. Is there any disagreement here on Old Station?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from a standpoint is the first one failed. I believe there's going to be a second petition at some point. I'm guessing it's inevitable that it will become in the city limits, whether it's not going to be tomorrow, but probably sometime next year. I'm guessing that we'll get to that point and it will happen. It's property owner driven, and so we're kind of waiting for the process to work itself through. I think Brad and I both agree it's a big thing for our city to have it. I find it ironic that we never really talked about it until I put together a sustainability committee. We were at one of our other interviews for this, and I said, I'm proud that we're at least talking about it, because we hadn't talked about it for how long before. So, I'm glad we're talking about it, because I think for the long term it's the right thing to do.
Are you going to need the PUD to sign on to that in order to get the...
I think it's too early to tell at this point. We've gotten some information back from the assessor's office. We've reviewed it. It's too early to get into detail as to exactly how to make that happen. What's more interesting, I would say, Cal, would be the fact that the process under state law is, how do you say this, a bit messy and a bit unclear. And so it's just one of those ones you just got to keep plugging away at it, learning more every chance you can. You would find it interesting that the state legislature 3 or 4 years ago passed a law that said if you're in Eastern Washington City and you have population in excess of 160,000 people, if you're doing annexations, tax-exempt property doesn't count. Seems interesting, doesn't it? That was written specifically for Spokane, okay, because they have the same struggle we're having now, which is there's all this tax-exempt property, and how do you value it, and who's supposed to sign the petition? It becomes messy at best. I'm not interested in going to Olympia and asking for some sort of special law for the city of Wenatchee. That doesn't sound right to me. On the other hand, we've got to try to figure out what the system is, and try to figure out how to make it happen. But the Sustainability Committee are pretty smart folks. I think they'll figure it out.
Brian, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I think the reason it wasn't talked about initially as far as the annexation is because by contract we weren't allowed to really talk about it. If you wanted to expand out in that area, then somebody had to petition us, and the city was to remain neutral and not get involved in that. Whether that's directly or indirectly through an advisory committee, I don't know. There's been some discussion with the county commissioners about that on whether we really remain neutral in that process. But it is certainly a process that needs to take place, but it needs to be done collaboratively, and we need to work with the affected parties to make sure that there's proper revenue sharing agreements or whatever it may be, so that one entity versus the other isn't overly impacted by the annexation. And eventually we will all benefit. The county and the city, we will all benefit. The whole region will benefit from this, and so it needs to take place. But with that becomes some other transportation issues, the streets and the congestion on North Wenatchee Avenue, and those are separate issues, but that all needs to be worked out as well.
And just to make it clear, and I know Brian knows this, I've had multiple conversations with county commissioners over the last 2 years, encouraging open discussions about different revenue sharing options for Old Station. Have been shut down both times, so it does take 2 to dance. I don't think I haven't looked at what that looks like in Old Station and tried to understand both sides of the issue. But if you're not willing to talk, so I've tried.
Relationships between the county commissioners and the county and the city on this seem to be a bit frosty. And is that sort of a natural part, or is there something that should be done?
You asking that to me?
Either of you.
You want to go first? Or want me to go first?
I can go first. I think it is frosty. I mean, there's been some, there's always seems to be talk of legal action involved. It always seems to be an option. It seems like we're either always in legal action or going into legal action. And I think that kind of goes back to the playing well in the sandbox. If you've got a couple of willing parties that really want to work out an agreement together for the best interest of both parties, then I think that can be done. But if adversarial relationships are created, then it becomes very difficult to come to a common solution where you can even agree to disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider them frosty. I really don't. I mean, I sat there with Ron Walter 2 mornings ago and chit-chatted with him for half an hour about all kinds of different stuff. And I see Keith Gaynor all the time, and I see Doug all the time. So I don't consider the relationships frosty. I mean, if it was frosty, we wouldn't have just signed an agreement for doing emergency management with the county, right? And we just wouldn't have renewed our jail contract. And we're in the process of redoing our criminal justice in our jail. Our district court stuff. So listen, we continue to work together. Relationships kind of sometimes do this. I think we get along fine. We may not always agree. I don't always agree with Douglas County commissioners. We sit on regional boards together. I don't always agree with the mayor of East Wenatchee. That doesn't mean we don't respect each other and keep plugging away at it and find areas where we do have agreement and continue to work on those. I just don't think you get the collaboration that we've gotten without having some respect with each other.
Brian mentioned the city's role in the annexation and legally what you can and can't do, and he said the county commissioners have made some comments about the city overstepping its bounds in that. Are you familiar with this?
No, I've not heard anything from any of the county commissioners about that. So,
where does that come from, Brian?
That came from actually a report in the Wenatchee World that I remember reading, talking about that they were considering all options. They never pursued that, but they were definitely not happy about the situation and what they felt was the involvement of the city, in my opinion.
So, on a different subject, Brian mentioned in his initial response that seemed to indicate that the city should expand its role in counteracting homelessness and higher rental rates. Is that what can the city do?
That's a very difficult thing to solve. I mean, like I say, we are a victim of our own success sometimes. As we come in, we make a lot of people happy that own rental properties when their rental rates go up, but there's a lot of people that are pushed out of their homes. So the homeless problem is something we've been dealing with for a long time. It's gotten worse in some respects because Wenatchee's become known as the area to go that has all the great services for the homeless. So people have come from outside the area and actually migrated to Wenatchee because of the services we have. So sometimes you can almost provide too good of services. But working with the Regional Support Network has gone through their trials and tribulations in trying to get housing, and it's just an extremely expensive proposition. So it's going to take working with state and federal government in different agencies and programs so that we can find a way to subsidize the housing and get more people off the streets.
Are you saying that you think that the services the city provides is too much?
I'm not sure there's too much, but the word has gotten out, amongst the homeless community that if you need, facilities, if you need food, if you need services, that Wenatchee does a good job of providing those. So at some point we need to make sure we make the transition and not just take care of the symptom, the hunger and the homelessness, but we solve the problem, and that's the expensive part. We actually have to transitional house these people and get them back into society, and jobs go along with that because we can't just continually subsidize forever. We have to at least get these people back into society and working and being productive members.
So does the city and the city services have a role to play in trying to counteract rising rental rates?
That becomes pretty difficult as far as what the role might be, but it would certainly be a collaborative effort with other agencies and municipalities to try to work out a long-term plan on how to help out. And a lot of times it might be service organizations and other groups, churches that get involved already. At some point we have to find a way, and maybe it's some of the resources, the revenues that we receive as a city. As we grow, maybe some of that should be set aside to help that homeless problem if the rising rental rates are pushing people out of their homes.
Frank, any?
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of break this into two different spots. First, you have what I would call the chronically homeless, which are most likely mentally ill, have drug and alcohol issues, and you see them in our streets. We have the Parkside facility that has, I guess, nicely gotten off to a slow start. There is $3 million in this biennium Senator Parlett put in for physical improvements to the building. I'm expecting in the next 6 months or so that as the RSN kind of fades out, that this new organization will come in, and it's either going to be Catholic Family or Confluence will kind of take over mentally the mental ill and some of the emergent need housing for the mentally ill and drug abuse at the Parkside facility after this $3 million is put in it. That will help that part of it, not completely, but that should help. In terms of what the city can do for the fact that apartment rents are rising, obviously market dictates most of that. My staff, Steve King in particular, has been at Ellensburg. There's a great model in downtown Ellensburg where they took one of the downtown properties, put parking underneath, and I think there's about a 50-unit apartment building right above it. Rents are, in the $800 range. Something that we ought to be able to look at. Our price of land should be similar. The other thing that would help with some of that is we have, I don't remember if it's 180,000 square feet of second story space in our downtown Wenatchee core, that if we could just figure out the parking and how to allow more development to take place down there, that would be a spot where, one, it would be really cool to live downtown, and second, might be able to take some of the burden off of that. And we're currently doing a parking study right now to figure out how to free up some of that. Our parking code is pretty tight. It says if you've got a unit, you need to have a parking stall. So that takes a lot of the upstairs units and takes it out of the ability to put residential apartments in there. So I think those are a couple of things we can do to kind of help.
Yeah, I think parking's always been the issue. We've talked about utilizing space up on the upper levels downtown for years, but there's just never been a good solution as far as getting somebody to their home. Where are they going to park? And we've talked about large parking facilities, but it seems to always be a $20 or $30 million bill, and it just doesn't pencil out economically. So if you can get the people down there that really do the live work thing and don't have a car, then we'd be okay. But it's always going to be a where do you find property at an economical cost to put the parking facility in? And since those are retrofitting these old buildings built in 1900, parking wasn't quite the problem. But putting underground parking in those facilities, of course, is absolutely impossible. But it's strictly economics. How do you do that economically, and so that those units can be utilized?
Thank you. Let's move on here. This first question would be for Brian. We've been talking about the Sustainability Committee and its report, and there seems not to always be agreement among the candidates about which of those recommendations from the Sustainability Committee should be followed. And Brian, can you start? Can you speak to what recommendations you think the city should follow from the Sustainability Committee, and which ones you think should not be followed?
Well, to start with, I do have the utmost respect for everybody on that committee. When it was first formed, my only concern was that there wasn't no gender diversity, socioeconomic diversity, or cultural diversity on that committee. And therefore, you tend to represent a certain segment of the community and not the entire community. As far as going forward, the annexation is something that was recommended of Old Station, and that is something we should go forward with. The annexation of the fire department is nearing completion, and that was the right thing to do. As far as contracting out services for the police department, I don't believe that should be done. Definitely against that. And I'm against the proposition of 58 cents per thousand assessed valuation increase in property taxes and $70 per full-time equivalent tax to employers for each employee, for profit or nonprofit. And those things just I don't feel need to be done, especially as far as talking about the fixed income people out there. A 66% increase in their electric utility tax is something that would be very difficult to burden them with right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is obviously they gave us a roadmap. Well, things change as you work your way through the map. the city council's approved $20 car tabs for the next 20 years or so, which was a recommendation. They recommended that we pay off debt. We've paid off half the debt that they recommended by 2 lawsuits that I worked on to help settle. Annexation of the fire department and annexation of Old Station were crucial to their recommendations. I think what they've told us, and which I've said publicly, is we need to take care of those things first, stop, see where we're at. We don't know for sure what the revenue is going to look like in Old Station. We have some guesstimates, but who knows for sure what those are going to be like. We have an idea what it's going to cost us to provide services out there, but until you do it, you don't really know for sure. So there's obviously going to be a delta there, the difference between the revenue and the cost to provide services. So we'll have to incorporate that into our budget in some way or another. Maybe some of that money is used for roads and other improvements that I've already talked about. So, when you look at, and then I think after that, which is, that's 2 or 3, 4 years down the road, you got to stop and say, okay, what's the city budget? Where are we at? What's it look like for growth? Most of the recommendations that they provided for, which was an increase in utility tax, needs to be voted on by the people. So you can't make a legitimate argument for why you would do that. It certainly won't pass. We had the opportunity to do the property tax increase with the fire annexation. We chose not to. Why mix them up? Should you combine fire, yes or no? If there's a need for a property tax increase, at some point we'll go to the people and ask them for that. I don't know that the need is there yet. So that's my view, is you got to get through this and then stop and see. What we can continue to do is continue to look for opportunities to partner with our neighboring governmental entities. To have 5 public safety police departments between the city, the county, and the state patrol seems a bit odd to me. So if there's chances for us to partner, for instance, we're going to partner with the city of East Wenatchee, maybe doing some IT work together, right? We have a 4-person IT department. They have a 0-person IT department. We've lost 25 employees because our fire department moved on, so one of our guys has some free time. Why not? There's a certain expertise in doing municipal IT. Why not partner and do that? It's those kinds of things I think we need to continue to try to look at. I say all the time, every time a person leaves our department, I stop and say, our city, is there a better way to do this? Is there a different way to do this? Does it make sense just to rehire the same position, or are the things changing to a point where we can do it differently? I think you have to do that continually. And again, if we need a raise taxes to pay for something, we'll go to the vote of the people and we'll either get it or we won't. I trust the voters to tell me what it is they think we ought to be doing.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, what he's describing is a flexible sustainability report, and I have argued from the beginning when the Sustainability Committee came to council on multiple occasions and stated that you must do everything on the list. And I consistently stated that there will be things that are not on the list that we do, and there'll be things that are on the list that we don't do. That makes sense. That is a flexible report that as things change, you've got a projection out there of 0 increase in sales tax, 0 increase in federal excise tax. Well, we've had a 6 to 7% increase, and so we have extra income in there, and that's why that should have been a flexible document from the beginning. And it was stated numerous times that you must do everything on the list, to the point that we actually had a $140,000 plugged into the budget, which would have been Confluence Health's contribution to the $70 per full-time equivalent employee. Was actually in the budget. So that's not something we were waiting to do and recommend. This is something that we've been going forward on from the beginning.
So, did you support consolidation of the fire services?
Yes, for the last 30 years.
So,
Pretty remarkable. We did it under my leadership, and he's been supporting it for 30 years.
Well, you're opposed to consolidation of law enforcement.
Correct.
So what's the difference?
The difference is there's a different funding source for number one with the annexation. So the fire services will be taxed separately as a different revenue source. With the police being right in the city budget, if that's contracted out with the sheriff's office, then we'd be writing a check to the sheriff's office for that. And as administrations change, commissioners change, sheriffs change, things can change quickly, and they could double the cost of the contract, and there's no way we could go back and reform a police department. Once it's gone, it's gone. Also, the level of service would be dropped dramatically, as the sheriff's office is trying to serve Cashmere and Chelan and other communities in Leavenworth, and there's just no way that they can do a thorough, in-depth job in the city of Wenatchee and have the resources to really keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on and be proactive.
Well, wouldn't they have the additional resources from this contract with the city to provide the same level of coverage?
I don't believe so. They're going to, again, that contract can go way up. We will have no control over that contract, and so they were estimating a savings of $300,000 a year. And I think what they did is they were using about $100,000 per employee, so they figured they were going to save 3 employees. Well, there's just no control over that. That's going to change. But the police department that has units that are out in the community, special gain units and those kinds of things, specific to Wenatchee and what's going on within Wenatchee, you can't take a regional police force and keep your, like I say, on the pulse on what's going on intimately within the city of Wenatchee. I just don't, as being a reserve officer for 14 years and operating in that capacity, I just don't believe that they could get near the level of service that we're receiving now.
Do you see those same difficulties, and do you see 3 fewer officers as a result of this?
Here's what I would say. I think it's too early to tell what any sort of a combined department for police would look like. I think, listen, let's give the sustainability committee credit for the fact that we talked about fire annexation and did it. We talked about Old Station annexation, and it's going to happen. They've asked us to look at police consolidations. They mentioned, maybe it's the sheriff's office. Maybe it's Wenatchee and East Wenatchee. Maybe that's a better fit for urban police, that Wenatchee and East Wenatchee get together and talk about putting something together where we combine resources, save on overhead, and do that. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, Cal. I couldn't begin to tell you how many or what kind. I'm not an expert in police force, other than they've given us a roadmap to sit there and talk about it, and I think we ought to at least talk about which one might make the most sense, if any of them. Maybe the answer is doesn't make any sense. Maybe the answer is just the way we're doing it is the right way to do it, and that's fine. I think the fact that there's an ability to talk about it, I couldn't tell you whether there'd be more or less police officers, to be honest with you. I think it's too soon to tell. I think we should at least continue to have a discussion.
Anything more to add?
Well, I would just say I think there's some new things kind of being thrown in. I've mentioned as far as not contracting out with the sheriff's office, but I've also talked about working things out with the state patrol, Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Chelan County, also East Wenatchee Police, and a lot of the events that take place and when trying to locate suspects, and I constantly hear where they're heading out into the county or across the bridge into East Wenatchee, and they're always contacting other agencies. There can be interagency agreements worked out, and I've mentioned that as far as to do a better job, more efficient job of serving the entire valley together. But the initial sustainability report, I don't recall any discussions about that at all. It was strictly that they recommended contracting out services with the sheriff's office.
Okay. So I guess the next lead question goes to Frank.
Sure.
Okay. Talk about your leadership skills and what sets you apart from your opponent.
I can't tell you what sets me apart from my opponent. All I can tell you is what I've done is 4 years as mayor. Okay. All I can tell you is, I jumped into a hornet's nest, and every single meeting I was in took a different leadership skill to try to figure out how to get us to a point where we could have 8 communities voting on a 1/10 tax increase, how we could get to Olympia and get legislation that got through a short session and in front of the governor and signed so that we could councilmatically do a 2/10. The level of skill that took, and one time it's beating him with a hammer, one time it's hugging the mayor of Rock Island or hugging Mayor Lacey. I mean, all of that comes into play when you do these things. And so I don't know that I have a style. Someone will probably tell you I have a style. I don't know what it is. All I know is it's worked. It's worked for our city. We got out of a mess. And quite frankly, and I've said this and Brian's tired of hearing it because we say it all the time, is once we got through the Town Toyota Center mess and we put together all of that legal stuff and we wrapped it up and we were done, our city's taken off. I mean, Pybus Market happened after that. The city had big involvement down there in terms of roads and streets, and our fingerprints are all over that. But Mike Walker gets, and good for him, is his money. We worked diligently to get that apartment complex down at 9th and Wenatchee Ave, or 9th and Riverside Drive. A big kudos to staff for making that work and being flexible enough to make that happen. And so you have to, I can't tell you what my style is. I don't know what it is, other than we've got stuff done that we've talked about in this community for 20 years and no one's figured out how to make it happen. I've said all along, even when I ran last time, I'm keeping my CPA job because I want the freedom to be able to make decisions based on what I think is right, not necessarily on getting reelected. Look at our unions. You remember 3 years ago we had some issues when I had to make some budget cuts, which isn't very fun, by the way. Made them. Continued to work with our unions, and I got a letter of support and a $500 check from AFSCME, our largest union, endorsing my campaign. So how does that happen? Okay, it happens because you have a leadership style that works. You never say, I'm not willing to talk to you. Doors open. Let's keep working. We'll get there. And so, some people think I'm a bully. I'm not a bully. I continue to try to work on all the things that I think work. And, I just look at that union example as one that I find it quite remarkable that we've come that far in 3 years. And I think you can have harmonious relationships with your union. So that's all I can say is I've done it for almost 4 years, and it's either the right leadership style or it's not.
You mentioned flexibility on the Riverside Drive apartment complex. Did that
Yes, sir.
include cutting back the amount of parking that they were required to
So the parking code has ranges, right? And you get credit for if you're on the transit line, and you get credit for different various things. And so we were in a tough spot with that piece of property. Landowners have rights to build under current city code, right? The first plan they brought us was something akin to low-income housing. It wasn't what we thought was the right fit for that piece of property. I sent my staff to every development around that had looked like the proposed one that they'd given us on the first drawings. We came back, and as a city, we met with city council, and we talked about, is that really what you want for that prime piece of property? And so we worked on a deal with them where they got a few extra building, or one extra building, a few extra units. The parking got down to the very minimum of what's required. Okay,
So it's the minimum, it's not below the minimum?
Nope, it's right at the very bottom end of the minimum, 1.0 something per unit. But we also said you will buy the property across the street. You will we asked them to put in 50 spaces across the street. They put in 70 spaces. We said once the building is complete and you get rid of all the contractors, and we'll go down and we'll do a parking study, okay? And we'll see how it works. And if you go across the street and they're using half of those for Riverside 9, then when the building goes in next door, they won't get credit for those as parking spots. They'll only get to use the other ones. So it's a very flexible agreement with the developer that allowed a little bit of a higher end. There's commercial in there. There's a couple of very nice commercial units. There's live-work units in there. I see people all the time that are living there and love it, to be right on the river. So I think it was a win-win between the developer and the city to try to get something that works for both of us. So, and I think time will tell. We also have the property across the street that's, the PUD has it. It's where the Row and Paddle Club is. And if we need to, we have LRF dollars, which are state dollars, and we can turn around and we can pay that for public parking as well. So we have options to help with the parking situation down there if, in fact, it looks like we need to.
Thank you. So we'll go back to Brian for the original question, which was talk about your leadership skills and what sets you apart from your opponent.
Yeah, I think there's quite a gap between the leadership styles. I'm one that's very committed. My word is my bond, and my concern with him as far as commitment is that he was on the council when the Town Toyota Center was proposed and eventually built. And I don't know what the reasons were, but a year early, he resigned from the council, and I just think that if you make a commitment, that you need to stay on there even when the going gets tough. And then if you make a commitment to only run one term, I think you need to keep that commitment as well. I've been committed to public service for 28 years, thousands of hours of community service, and I've done it because it feels good to help the community that I love. And that's what I'm in it for. I'm in it for the people, and it's the collaborative word gets used a lot, but it's the team spirit, team building, and morale building leadership style where you have buy-in from the people that you serve. And you need to get the direction of where your government should be going from those same people that elect you. And I've just seen a little bit too much of, they call it the cram down process, and the public, when I talk with them, they have a lack of trust for their government, and I'm part of that government, and I don't like to feel that way. And they feel it's the good old boy network, and I want to talk about unions. I wouldn't accept any money from unions. I don't work for special interests. I work for the people. I work for everyone. So I think that's the big difference. Is my leadership style is working together for a common goal and trying to unite our community and be on the same team and head in the same direction.
Response?
No, there's nothing there to respond to.
Well, there kind of is. Did you make a pledge to only run for one term?
Oh, I think, Brian and I had some private conversations back then. I think I've said, listen, I worked for the first year on Town Toyota Center issues, and my staff would ask me, "Are you going to run again?" And I said, "I don't know if I'm going to run again." This job is hard. It's complicated. It's why I now have gray hair, and my blood pressure's up. I lost to Gustavo in a blood pressure contest the other day. You know what? It's a ton of work. But when your community comes to you after 3 years of doing what I've done, and leaders in the business community come to you and say, "Will you continue to do that? We've got a lot of momentum going in a really positive direction." Do you say no to your business community? Do you say no to the people on your sustainability committee and say, "Well, no, thanks for your information"? I didn't know I was doing a sustainability committee when I ran 4 years ago. I mean, who would have known? Who would have known you were going to have the layoffs that we did? No one knows those things. You don't know them when you get into them. So obviously we've accomplished a lot, and when these people come to you and say, "Please," you look at that, introspectively, and you say, "Well, they want me to keep doing it. What have we accomplished? What's next on the, are we getting things done?" And I think when the people asked me, I said, I'd think about it, and last Christmas time I decided I'd run again. So I just don't know how you know what's going to happen in a 4-year time frame. Mayor Lacey, prime example, right? He came out the day after he got elected and said, "This is my last term," right? How'd that work for him? He's right back at it again, okay? So I would say things change.
Yeah, things do change, but again, if it depends on your character, your integrity, and your word. And it's nothing personal. It's just that I think is where the lack of trust for the government comes from the community. That and lack of transparency. They don't feel there's very good access to the people, to the government. And unless we go out to the people and listen to them, rather than talk to them, but listen to them and work for them, you don't get that. And I just want to stop that lack of trust in our government. I want to hang that rotary 4-way desk in the mayor's office.
This lack of transparency?
Mm-hmm.
How so? How's that manifest?
Transparency is when you're running government, and you'll be able to respond to this better than me, but there's a lot of things that you have to do behind the scenes. But at the same time, you need to get the input from those that are affected by your decisions so that you have more of a team process in the decision-making process. There are times when you have to, emergency situations, you have to make the tough decisions. There's no question about that. Being in the banking business for 27 years, I've had to make some real tough decisions that affected a lot of people's lives. That's part of the game. You have to do that. It's part of the job. But you also have to always keep your your commitments. That's just something that I don't take lightly. So I'm one that will keep my commitments.
Anything to add? Thank you. So the final question then, I guess, for Brian to start. If you could just give us a 1-minute closing statement on why voters should elect you.
I think I've, you can talk about walking the walk and talking the talk. I've walked the walk for 28 years as far as public service goes. Built those relationships out there in the community. I think there's a huge part of the community that's excited about a new direction and getting behind it and being involved in the process. And I think we are America's best city out there, and I think that we need to go in that direction and band together. And if we can integrate and unite our community, which I believe that we can, I think the change in leadership right now is the catalyst to make that happen.
Same question.
All I would say is, I took on a city 4 years ago that was financially bankrupt and in a really difficult spot. And we have gotten through the bad times. We are working our way out the backside. We've accomplished a ton. We're in a way better financial spot than we were. We're actually going to put $500,000 in a rainy day fund this year for the first time in the history of our city. And there's a lot of great things still coming down the pike, and the issue is why change? Why change leadership styles today if the one that you've had for the last 4 years has been successful? And I'd like to think that the last 4 years have been successful. Most of the people I talk to seem to tell me that it's been going well. So I'd like the opportunity to kind of keep plugging away at what we've started.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Thank you both for coming in.
Thanks, Cal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Rufus. Retired person in the background.
Almost retired.
Can we
Her mom's
add
still
to
on
it?
payroll, though. Keep her mom on payroll.
Sure.
I just really think that
Let her know.
before we get too far, we need to really thank the community, because without Proposition 1, without the council and everybody working together, and all the things that we've had and taken credit for, it's been a group. It's not one person. It's the council. Pete Fraley's done an amazing job in doing all these negotiations, and especially the citizens of all areas in the Public Facilities District having to come up with Proposition 1 and make that happen. We went to them hat in hand and begged for help, and we got it. And we can't forget that they were a big part in saving us.
Yeah, okay.